In this teaching, I'd like to talk about the building blocks of experience, which means the different components of our experience that make up what we see as reality. And we do this by noticing emotions, thoughts, body, and by starting with the breath. And these are the different building blocks or components of self, or what we think of as self, or our sense of self. And we notice this by directing our attention and relaxing into awareness or mindfulness. And so by starting with the breath, this allows us to become calm and our minds to stabilize so that we can see clearly, what's happening in our experience. And sometimes, starting with the breath is difficult. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes, it starts out one way and then changes because that's what, life and experience teaches us, that things are, constantly moving and changing. So if this is happening, if you're having a difficult time or when you have a difficult time, it could be helpful to start to pay attention to sounds as an anchoring point into the breath and then into the body. And then we'll be able to expand into emotions and into thoughts. So just noticing, what the sounds are like in the room, staying with that, arising and passing, and then gently bringing your attention into the breath when it feels more natural. Just a suggestion for those of you that might be having a difficult time with it. And then also one of the traditional teaching points is noticing if the breath is shallow or long. And this really is a foundation for understanding how these different building blocks come together in order to make these big towers of self. And, there's even a study now coming out of Northwestern University that is verifying some of these teachings that have been around for thousands of years, about how, when we breathe shallow, when our breath is shallow, it creates different kinds of emotions and thoughts. Shallow breath might be correlated with fear and different kinds of memories. If you breathe out of your nose, this is what's happening. If you breathe out of your mouth, this is what's happening. And this is just, ideas so that, you can pay attention more to your breath. Like, what is this really like? It's very interesting to see, to really spend time with this component, to really ground yourself with the breath so that we can be more embodied as we breathe. And that study from Northwestern University we'll put in the notes section so that you'll be able to read that later in more detail. And so as we learn these different components and how they form, how they come together and to form the different formations, it's kind of like, when I'm playing with my 2-year-old and he's got all his building blocks out and, he's stacking and stacking and he takes that attention, right, and awareness, mindfulness to, continue to stack and stack, the steadiness, right? And then, at some point, it's destruction. He comes in and, knocks them all over, either in one fell swoop, which is possible, once we develop in our mindfulness, the whole experience can be held, all of it, the sense of self can arise and pass and change and be fluid without necessarily needing to pick it apart. And it's helpful to be able to pick it apart. He can come in and just take one block out of the center and the whole thing collapses because it's like, oh, that's how ephemeral the sense of self is. And so we can pay attention to, okay, so there's that thought. Oh, I bet there's that emotion. Oh, wait, I've noticed that emotion first. What's my breath like? Oh, here it is in my body. And so over this program, we're going to become more and more and more familiar with that program, that unconscious or conscious programs that we're running. So that we can be free from any kind of extra suffering, so that we can come back into, return again and again into here, breathing, body, the direct experience of life rather than needing to layer a lot of different things on top of it that's just not needed. A lot of stories or extra emotions, things that, we can be free of. And then present for ourselves and for others. And this presence, we all have experienced it in moments, in glimpses. And it becomes more and more and more available, more and more consistent, normal, ordinary, and honestly incredibly powerful, because then we can influence our lives without needing to necessarily control it or manipulate it. And we're comfortable with how, these towers of self can come online and how they can unravel. Because it really is held by something that's much, much bigger than when we are in that contracted sense of self. We unwind to be able to include more and more. And then if it contracts, it can contract, and then it expands, and we just learn how to work with it. And we're comfortable with change. And so when we're able to do this, the action in our lives, it comes from a different place than when we don't recognize the building blocks. It comes from a place of steadiness. It comes from a place of wholeheartedness. And then we're able to make a difference in the world. And it really impacts the way we respond to difficulties, and joys. And it's more comfortable and content, even in the discomfort.